I love Persona. I freaking love Persona. If you were to ask me what video game franchise has influenced my life the most, Persona would be top 5, if not top 3. You know, this was a franchise that when I was a kid, playing Persona 3 for the first time, I had a friend sleeping over. I thought to myself, my little naive, immature minds, what's the best way to convince my friends to play Persona 3? What's the best way I could portray how awesome and amazing this game is? I'm gonna beat the game right in front of them. I'm gonna spoil it. That's how much I loved it back then, and I loved it all the way through Persona 5. And then something happens. When I think about all of the video game franchises that I love, Persona is the one that I have the most problems with. And it shouldn't be that much of a surprise. We all can relate, right? We all have that thing that we love so dearly, so much, but we also criticize it. We're its biggest critic, you know? That's Persona to me. I sincerely believe that Persona gets away with a lot. Not just because of its unique gameplay loop, but because of its style, because of its swagger. You know, it's a one-of-a-kind game. No other game, let alone JRPG, will make us feel the way we do while playing Persona. And you're probably asking, why am I bringing this up now? Persona 5 came out all those years ago. And well, it's because Persona has become relevant on social media and gaming news. Persona 3 just got its remake, and some of you Persona fans might share my disappointments with the fact that Persona 3, that remake, is not gonna have the Persona 3 Fez and portable content. You know, if you're hoping for a definitive version of Persona 3, well, too bad. If you want to enjoy Persona 3 to the fullest, you're gonna have to buy 2 different versions and emulate one of them. It's not the most reassuring news to hear. It will probably have its own quirks, its own perks that we don't know about yet, but it's just disappointing, and that it reflects how I felt about Persona for a while, which is why I'm bringing this up now. Here are 5 ways that I think Persona needs to change. You can also interpret it as 5 reasons why I no longer love Persona like I used to. Reason number 1 should probably be the most obvious. It's the fact that I am fatigued by how much Persona is milked. I just want to move on. I just want to move on to Persona 6. I don't want to think about Persona 5. I don't want to think about Persona 4. I'm tired of it. Persona 5, you have like just endless, there's Persona Q2, there's Persona 5 Dancing, there's Persona 5 Muso-like sequel, there's Persona 5 Tactics, there's going to be a Persona 5 farming game probably, Persona 5 Tax Simulator, Persona 5, you know, Dark Souls-like. How many Persona 5 games can we squeeze out of our fans? How many dollar bills can we allow to drop in our bank accounts until we finally just move on from all of it? The answer is unlimited, because all you Persona fans, you're part of the problem. You're part of the problem. You keep buying these random spin-offs, you keep eating it up, and that's, you know, if you enjoy it, that's cool. You know, that's cool, but I am not one of those people. It's like on a production line. They're just shoving these games out because they know that IP, those characters, they will automatically sell a good amount of copies, an amount of copies that they're happy with, and hey, let's attach this genre, attach this genre. It's just, I've had enough. I've had enough. Oh, let me not forget to mention, let me not forget the fact that it's not just the spin-offs, it's those enhanced ports, those remasters, Persona 4 Golden and Persona 5 Royal. What's the similarity? The fact that a big new appeal about them is a new waifu. That's how they get you in, especially Persona 5 Royal. You are gonna feel FOMO for not getting to know that new red-haired chick. I don't really know much about her because I haven't played Royal. I wasn't suckered in like some of you, okay? Like, a lot of you bought Persona 5 again because you would have felt FOMO if you didn't get to know this new party member waifu. That's how they get you. That's how they keep milking you. It's not just about all new games. It's about finding these little cheap new ways to sucker you in. Don't be surprised if out of nowhere they announce a new female character for the Persona 3 remake. You ever think about how that red-haired chick is not in any of the spin-offs, but you still feel that FOMO? You still feel that FOMO from not playing Persona 5 Royal. That's how they get you. They're admitting that it's inconsequential by not having her in any other game, but they know you're gonna buy it because you can't resist that anime waifu FOMO. Reason number 2. I said before that even if you don't like anime, you could still appreciate Persona because it's just that stylish. But it's crazy to me. It's crazy to me that there are people who will fully enjoy Persona, yet will diss anime. Because Persona is full of anime filler. Now, don't get me wrong. I am not against anime, obviously, if you couldn't tell. I like anime. I could enjoy anime filler. But Persona has so much anime filler. And the example I will use, my go-to example, is Persona 4 Golden. In my opinion, this is probably the most volcanic hot take in this video. Persona 4 Golden is worse than the OG Persona 4 because most of what they added to Persona 4 Golden is just filler. They added a second hot spring scene that plays out the exact same way as the first, which plays out the exact same way as any cliché anime game. They added another anime trope, this school band concert that just happens so quickly and then nobody ever mentions it ever again after it happens. It's like so transparently, it's so blatantly inconsequential. It's there because we're anime and we're at a school. I would say at least half the time, it's a 7 out of 10 anime. That's just sincerely how it feels. These scenes individually, fine, sure, whatever. But the fact that they're so rampant, especially in Persona 4, if you love Persona 4, that's great. I'm happy for you. But for me, like, that is the quintessential Persona game where it's just like, dude, let's just move on. I could just boot up a random anime on Crunchyroll. I don't have to see it here. Like, I don't need this. This directly leads to the third reason, and it's that Persona is too damn long. Now, of course, Persona is inherently going to be a long game, not just because it's a JRPG, but because of the calendar system. When you have a story that takes place throughout several months, close to a year, that's going day to day to day to day, yeah, that's gonna be a really long game. I don't have a problem with that. My problem, it's just so unnecessary long. Persona does not respect your time. There's so many scenes that just happened because, well, it's a new day, we gotta show these friends hanging out, so here you go. There's so many scenes where, like, nothing happens. They just talk about what they're gonna do later on, and, like, that's it. They could have been summed up in, like, a text. I get it. I get why they're there, but they don't need to be. Your game's long enough. You don't need to pad a game that's already long. And Persona 5 is the biggest example here. This time it's Persona 5. So Persona 4 fans, you can chill. Persona 5, I'm talking about that gameplay. I'm talking about that space dungeon where I swear Morgana tells you like 3 or 4 times that you're almost there, but he's lying. You're not almost there. That dungeon takes an eternity to get through. It's one of the most memorable parts of the game to me, but in like the worst way. It was miserable. It was completely miserable. And then also the finale. The finale of Persona 5 goes on forever. That game refuses to end. It just won't end. It's just so unnecessary. And I know, look, I know that there's a lot of you who beat Persona 5. And you thought to yourself, man, I know that was a long game, but I just didn't want it to end. I want to play more of this. And maybe you did replay the game. Maybe you replayed it twice. I know people who have beat Persona 5 more than twice, and that just blows my mind because I beat it once and I never looked back. You can't tell me if the game was 10, maybe even 20 hours shorter, that you would love it less. Just honestly think about it. Would you love that game less if there was a good chunk of it cut out? No. You wouldn't feel like anything was missing, because that's just how much extraneous things there are in Persona 5. And it's not like other JRPGs, okay? It's not like a Xenoblade. Someone might tell you, oh yeah, that's like a 100-hour JRPG there. Well, they're only saying that because there's so much good side content worth going into. If you just want to beat the story, that's 50 hours. I beat every Xenoblade game in 50 hours. Persona, if you just want to beat that game, you have to commit to those 70 hours, to those 80 hours. With Persona 5, those 100 hours. No matter who you are playing that game, you signed up to commit that many hours. And that's why, to me, it's problematic that a lot of those hours probably shouldn't even exist. Oh, why is more content a bad thing, Nara? You should want games to have more content. Well, here's the thing. I say trim the fat sometimes. I really value pacing. Pacing is so damn important, especially when you become a functioning adult who has responsibilities with less free time. Pacing is everything. I don't want a game to feel way longer than it should be. There's a big difference between spending 100 hours because you wanted to and spending 100 hours because you had to. Persona 5 veers into that latter situation. You've already demonstrated that you can make a good Persona game in less than amount of time and a lot less hours. Just try to go for that again, please. Reason number 4 is what I like to call the Persona formula. Because I noticed that Persona 3, 4, and 5 basically have the same plot. It's just this formula, but with different words. Different character names. It's a template. It's like Mad Libs. And to really prove what I mean, I have to involve spoilers. Because if I explain just one of the games, it's gonna end up spoiling the rest of them. That's the nature of it being a template, a formula. So if you're not comfortable with seeing spoilers, maybe even for Persona 6, then I suggest you skip this section. But yes, this is what I call the Persona formula. You have the new kid who's silent yet unnaturally charismatic. You have the mascot who just so happens to have amnesia. You have the hot-headed yet loyal homie who's often the butt of the joke. You have the quirky, mysterious homie who's just misunderstood. You have the female authority figure who isn't like most girls. You have the male authority figure who's friendly and funny, but they end up betraying you? What? And then, one by one, all of your party members are going to take turns trauma dumping, spilling out their trauma, which is conveniently resolved in a mere few weeks. God forbid we have multiple characters developing at the same time. That would just confuse the audience. And just as you're thinking that any of that mattered, that any of the characters had agency, it turns out, at the last seconds, get this, it was all orchestrated by gods and fate and yada yada yada. I'm sure there's more I'm forgetting. This is an impromptu video, if you couldn't tell. But needless to say, you can just insert your own OC into those bullet points and you'll have your own Persona game. Now clearly I was being quite sardonic there. I mean, it's all true, but I was playing it up for my own amusement. The fact is, the reality is that, yeah, it's gonna have anime tropes because it's an anime JRPG. And yeah, it's gonna have its own tropes because all those games are Persona games. It's just like any other franchise. Any franchise is most likely going to have its own tropes that it follows. But to me, it's just more egregious to Persona because, I mean, I just listed out so many things. I could have done more if I put more thought into it. I think that's why, the biggest reason why, Persona 5 is no longer one of my favorite games of all time. Because Persona 5, it feels so different. The first arc, with the school, with Shiho, Kamoshida, when it was just the three of you, Joker, An, and Ryuji, in my opinion, that was the peak of the game. The stakes felt so freaking high. It felt unlike any other Persona game. Personal is the biggest way I could describe it. It felt so personal, because with Persona 3, there's a lot of personal drama there, but when you're fighting the shadows and all these, like, you know, the full moons go by, it's just kind of like whatever, right? They're not really so closely connected to the characters. But then Persona 4 comes along, and yeah, it's in your community. It feels more personal in terms of it being a serial killer, but there's literally one part, kind of spoilers, someone gets murdered. The next scene is literally the party members getting ice cream. Yeah, so much for really elevating the stakes there. Persona 5, that first arc, it just really felt like everything mattered. And it just never hit that way ever again. After that arc, it just kind of went back to, you know, same old, same old. If you played Persona 4 especially, you know what's going to happen. You know how this is going to end up. You know the formula. Persona 3 is still my favorite Persona story. Their characters actually develop throughout the whole course of the game. and I just like the themes of that game more. So ultimately, I just hope that you weren't spoiled about Persona 6. I really do apologize if this ends up impacting your experience with that game. It's not what I'm trying to do here. It's just, it's something that only becomes more glaring once it's pointed out to you. And it's been stuck in my brain for years, so I had to get it out to somebody. Last but not least, the fifth reason why I no longer love Persona like I used to, the fifth thing I desperately want to be changed in Persona 6 is the quality of the writing. The writing of Persona is not that good. If you want a good story, I would not tell you to play Persona. Like, it's good enough. It's fun. It's enjoyable. But considering these are 70 to 100 hour games that are chocked full of dialogue and characters that the game wants you to get invested in, it's not that good. Even Persona 3, my favorite Persona story, that has some pretty bad pacing issues. You might have forgot because the game at times is just so slow that it's forgettable. You might have forgot those moments because of all the emotional moments and it made you cry and all that. I get it. I was like that too. But I rewatched the game, someone's first playthrough on Twitch, and that's when I realized, oh yeah, this game and some of the story pacing is not great. Persona 4, I just don't vibe with that game. I don't like the humor. I hate Teddy. It's a serial killer mystery, but it's also 7 out of 10 anime filler for 90% of the game. Persona 5, its twists are like really cool, but it still defaults to the same old, and that disappointed me a lot. The thing that made me realize how, to me, lackluster Persona's writing is a game that's also 70 hours long and is often compared to Persona. Some would call it the Persona of this franchise. It's Fire Emblem Three Houses. Yes, I would say that Persona 5's gameplay is better, but if we're talking about strictly the writing, the characters, the narrative, Three Houses shits on Persona. It's really not even close. If you've played Persona but have not played Three Houses, you should probably take a little look. Not just because you'll enjoy that game too, but also because that's what a Persona calendar system story looks like when it's actually written well. Think about the social links and the confidants. I would honestly say that most of them are forgettable. Like I said, they're good enough. When you are playing them, you're invested enough that you want to see it through. But I swear, at least to me, as soon as I beat that game, you know, information went in, oh, it's out. It's already out. I could not tell you the plot of most of those storylines. I really couldn't. And that says a lot for these 10 cutscene events, sometimes throughout several months. You think you have more time to digest their storylines, and you have all these scenes that you should remember them. But a lot of them, again, at least to me, they're just kind of forgettable. I don't remember them until I'm like, oh yeah, I'm playing this game again. Oh, it's that guy. Oh yeah, he had this thing, I think. And a lot of it's just forgettable. You compare that to Three Houses, where it doesn't have 10 cutscenes between these characters. No, it has like 2 to 4. And there's so many support conversations, they call them, that are so memorable. I think of Annette and Claude. I think of Ignatz and Marianne. I think of Ferdinand and Hubert. Like, I could just list off so many off the top of my head. They just feel so much more valuable. They feel so much more memorable in the span of a few scenes. Again, 2 to 4 scenes. That's all you need compared to these 10 rank social links or confidants that just kind of like dust in the winds after I beat the game. If they're not a waifu, I'm gonna forget about them. You could play any of the routes in Three Houses, and you will fall in love with those characters. You can play all the routes, you will fall in love with more characters. There's 30 plus characters, they are all so well written, there's so much to get invested in, and yet you have these Persona games with less characters, and they have technically more to work with in terms of their own storylines, but it just doesn't hit the same. It doesn't. That's importance in these long games with so much dialogue, where bonds and friendship are a huge part of it. Three Houses, its writing in general is amazing, but the character work, I think, is supremely essential in these kind of games with these social elements. You gotta step it up, Persona. You gotta step it up. I am not saying that Persona needs to match the quality of Three Houses. Three Houses sets a very high bar for any game. All I'm saying is that Three Houses, having that calendar system, having those social elements, drawing those comparisons, it was able to open my eyes and see what Persona lacks, to see how Persona could improve. If you just play Persona and that's the only type of Persona type game you play, then yeah, I can see why it's not as obvious to you. But for me, it's like, it's kind of glaring. It's glaring that the bonds and the friendships that you make in Persona are not nearly as fruitful. I just want to be able to actually remember and hold close those bonds, okay? That cliche cutscene where everybody gathers together and they root you on for the final boss, I want that to mean something, okay? I want to actually see that scene and be like, oh yeah, I love half of those characters. You know, I actually want to feel that, not just get emotional because anime. Just do better, man. Just try. In all seriousness, Persona does not need to do any of the things I said in this video. Clearly, it can just keep coasting by. It can keep milking every dollar out of your wallet until it finally gives you Persona 6. That's fine, right? Like, I'm not holding a grudge against it. I still love the franchise. I'm not going to be bitter if Persona 6 doesn't address anything I said. I guess it's just kind of like a venting session. You know, a lot of us are feeling a little down after that Persona 3 thing. Maybe you empathize with me. Maybe you've been feeling the same way. Who knows? Either way, I just hope Persona 6 is a good one. Ideally for all of us. But at the very least for you, the Persona fan who is probably just content with how it's been going. That's the most important thing. I realize I am a minority here, and that's totally fine. That's okay with me. I definitely thought Metaphor was Persona 6, by the way. I was very excited. I was like, oh my god, Persona's finally changing. No. There would be an anime school if it was Persona 6. That's my bad. That's on me. But I'm looking forward to that too. Let's see how that pans out. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see y'all next time.